Welcome to CPA Advisory Show. I am Jerry Wells, CPA, and with me as always is my co-host, Chris. Good morning, Chris.
Good morning, Jeremy. How are you?
I am doing well, thanks. Really been looking forward to this episode. We've had a few great guests on so far and have really enjoyed those conversations, but this one is back to just you and me talking about books. Talking about some and not the accounting kind of books, the actual reading kind of books, the ones that have words telling you how to live a better life and how to be better in business and those kinds of things. So for this episode, we thought we would go through a few of our, I don't know if I would say favorite books, but maybe some of the most influential books on our businesses, our practices, and some books that we would recommend to other business owners, firm owners. That sound about right to you, Chris?
Yeah, it's about right. The way that I kind of thought about this and approached it once we decided what we were going to talk about today was, what are the 5 books that I've read that have been influential to me in trying to figure out how to deliver CAAS services, and the ones that I share with my team most frequently about how to deliver CAAS services and how to just think about putting that CAAS service offering together. So that's kind of the way that I approached it.
Yeah, so maybe real quick, just as some background on why you chose these books in particular. So when you say you chose them to think about being better at CAAS or how to think about CAAS, like what does that actually mean? Unpack that a little bit, and like what maybe give us some criteria for why these books were in your top 5.
Right. So my criteria for picking these books is not necessarily how do we deliver things in a technical way. It's more about how do we better ourselves to deliver those? How do we learn how to have better, more meaningful conversations? Yes, I do have one book in there that's kind of technical, that just kind of looks at accounting and finance in a little bit different way. And we'll talk about that here in a few minutes, but it's more about how do I have better conversations with people, whether it's team members or whether it's clients, just how do I deliver the message I'm trying to deliver in a better way? What about you?
Yeah, I think that's a good point because it reminds me of one of the last conversations with a guest we had where we started talking about soft skills, those sort of ancillary skills that are incredibly helpful in business, but really they just make you a better, more well-rounded person, right? They make you more relatable. They make you better able to engage with other people. And that's what we're doing, right? That's how we are being helpful with our clients. That's how we're attracting and getting clients. It's how we're helping advocate on behalf of our clients, whether it's with IRS or their vendors or their customers or whoever is. We're just trying to be better, more engaging, more relatable people. And so, yeah, some of these books, when I'm reading through them, I'm not necessarily picking a book because, this is going to teach me how to be a better accountant per se. Rather, it's just going to help me be a better business owner, a better servant to my clients, a better person in general. Some of these books that they may not have made it into my top 5, but they would probably be in my top 10, would be books really outside of the business realm entirely. They might be relationship books, right? They might be books about how to be a better husband, how to be a better father, how to be a better friend, things like that. So I think there's a pretty wide range of books that ultimately, if we put together a comprehensive list that, it would not just be a lot of accounting textbooks, which might be a little surprising to some people, especially outside the field.
So I have to ask you a loaded question now that you kind of brought it up, but do you think that the soft skill stuff translates from business to personal and vice versa?
Absolutely. In fact, one theme of some of the books that I'm actually going to talk about, I think go way beyond just business. Some of these books actually have lessons that I've applied both in business, dealing with prospects or clients, but also in personal life, dealing with a spouse or a child or a parent, right? And so there's a lot of crossover between how you deal with people both in your business life or your work life and in your personal or home life.
Very cool. All right. So Give us number one.
All right. So this is in no particular order. The assignment that you gave me was to come up with 5 books to talk about on this episode, and so this is in no particular order, but just based off the way I just kind of dumped these titles out. The first one that came to mind, and this is one that I read a few years ago. Now, keep in mind, I've really only been in business, a business owner, for almost 5 years now. So it's only been in the last 5 or so years that I've really started thinking about being a business owner. But one of the first ones that I picked up actually was a book called Built to Sell by John Warrillow. And this was my attempt at thinking about the beginning with the end in mind, right? Stephen Covey's second habit, begin with the end in mind. And so my thought process here was, if I'm starting a business, what kind of business do I want to be running? What do I want that business to look like, not just a year from now, but 5, 10, 20 years from now? And this title popped up. I had heard of John Warrillow's book in a few different places, I think on some podcasts, maybe searching around on Google. But really the premise here is John Warrillow has helped owners of agencies and professional services firms like accountants, but also attorneys, marketing agencies, those kinds of businesses, has helped them think about building a business that someone outside that business might actually want to buy. Right. And for a lot of professional services firms, that's a pretty tough sell, I think, because of the way we structure our businesses. In particular, we make ourselves the focus, right? We literally put our names on the door. Well, if you build a business around a name, it's going to be hard for somebody with a different name to really want to buy that, right? Because people might start coming to that business just because of a particular person's name on the door. And if that person isn't the one that's actually doing the work, right? If that person isn't the one that they're actually going to meet with and talk with, that might cause some problems with some of those clients or prospective clients. And so, that's one thing. The other thing is we tend to make ourselves the bottleneck of the business. We are not only the final decision maker, but we usually make all of the big decisions, and we usually review all of the work before it gets to the clients. We're usually the one handling most of the high level sort of client communications, that kind of thing. So in general, professional services firms struggle to build businesses that are attractive for others to acquire or buy out. And so what I wanted to do was avoid all of those traps, right? I wanted to build a business that would actually be an asset, right? And not a liability, not something that I would just have to be slaving at. I didn't want to just build another job for myself, right? I wanted to build an asset that at some point would actually be something that I could turn into a sort of, either an asset or a retirement plan, something along those lines. So I think if you're in that mindset, if you're trying to move beyond just doing the day-to-day technical work, if you're actually trying to build a business, something where you're not the bottleneck, you're not the only one doing the high-level work, you're not handling all the client relations, and is something that could be an asset to you down the road, I think this would be a great place to start.
That's awesome. My first book's actually going to piggyback off of that idea, but you said something that was interesting in there about how we as firm owners have a tendency to have our name on the firm, and that's the firm name. And it makes it a little bit more difficult to sell. It makes it a little bit more difficult to deliver services too, because everybody expects you to be the person who is going to deliver it. Now, my firm name is my name for a variety of reasons, none of which are interesting. And we are at the point where we're trying to make that where it's not the case for those exact reasons, because we don't want to set the expectation that I'm going to be the one necessarily delivering the services as our team grows. So I'm kind of wondering what your perspective is on that. At what point do you think about changing your firm name or rebranding or whatever you want to call it to something that is maybe not more generic, but more interesting and is going to translate better over to your customer, where they're not necessarily expecting you to be the person?
Yeah, that's a fantastic question, because my mentor had built a firm around his name, and so I did the same thing. I started building my firm around my name, and I think it's a business model question, right? Like, what kind of business are you trying to build? Are you trying to build, I saw a tweet the other day that it was basically there are two kinds of businesses. There are the ones that you're trying to build a scale, and then there are the ones that you're trying to build in order to have the lifestyle you want, right? And those are two very different business models. If you're trying to scale the business, it needs to be about the brand and not about you, right? Because you want people to be attracted by that business. If you're trying to build this lifestyle business, you're probably trying to keep it more small scale. You're not looking to just grow it for the sake of growth. You're trying to just get enough out of that business to support the kind of personal life you want, and then, kind of stop there with the growth. So, I'm kind of waffling somewhere in between. I'm not exactly sure which of those two I want. I think if you want the lifestyle business, then sure, go ahead, name it after yourself, be the focus, be the center of attention. And draw those clients into you and focus on those one-on-one relationships. If you're wanting to build the business to scale, to where you're not the bottleneck, you're not the one making all the key decisions, then probably build that brand off of you. Now, as far as me, I mean, yeah, I did the same thing. I put my name on the firm, but ever since then, I've been trying to build. Or at least think about the process of starting to build another brand that, probably legally, technically, tax-wise would be, a sub to my firm, which would still be the parent, but start diverting more attention off to that sub brand, right? And then start developing that instead, to where eventually the old brand would be just sort of the legal intact shell for the new brand. And I think that's sort of a safe way to do it. Maybe start pulling in new clients into the new non-personal brand. And then for your more forgiving clients, right, maybe start talking to them about having them transition over. I think as far as your existing clients, they're not going to know the difference, right? Because it's still going to be that new brand doing the work. But you raise a good point in that if you're building out that staff and you're trying to get yourself out of the day-to-day client communications, client work, that kind of thing, you need to start setting up those existing clients for the fact that you're not going to be the one answering all the phone calls. You're not going to be the one answering all the emails. You're not the one that's going to be doing all of the legwork for them. And just start having that conversation. Again, like we've always said, just be helpful, right? Just be communicating with your clients and be finding out. And, it's a great opportunity to think about your pricing as well. Maybe you have a superior package, a superior tier to your pricing scheme, where personal access to you now comes at a premium the way it didn't before.
Ooh, that's a good point. File that one away. Okay, so kind of to that point, built to sell. My first book is The E-Myth Revisited by Michael Gerber. I read this back in 2015. And the way that I kind of thought about my list was, what are the things that help me run a better business? What are the things that help me be a better person and have better conversations? So that's kind of where I'm starting. And for me, and I took 3 takeaways from each book, but for me, the E-Myth is really where running a true business, where that seed got planted for me. So my 3 takeaways: number 1, a business is something that you should work on, not in, which gets back to that built to sell branding conversation that we just had. And the business should be beyond you. Otherwise, you've created a job for yourself, which is totally cool. You can have that lifestyle business. You can have that jobby, as we call it, with some of our clients. Totally cool. It's just a matter of what you want. Do you want a huge, machine, or do you want, something that you can work in and make a comfortable living, and you're basically your own boss? So there's that. That's number 1. Number 2 is systematize, which is a big one for us. That kind of gets into the whole automation thing for me, and just building better processes and building better systems and having a system for everything that happens inside of the firm. We're really big on that. And then number 3 for me is document everything. So when we're talking about built to sell and building value in your firm, and you can help your clients with this as well, document everything, document all the policies and procedures. Then that helps when you bring somebody new into the firm who doesn't have experience in the firm, or maybe doesn't have experience in your way of doing things. It makes it much more plug and play, which it's probably not the right way to phrase that, but it makes it easier to get those folks up to speed because everything's documented, and someone can just pick up a document or pick up a Loom video or pick up whatever it is, however it is that you're putting together your documentation, and come into that firm and figure out fairly quickly how it is that you do things and why you do things. The way that we think about that is we document by process, but then we also document the peculiarities of our clients as well. And we've built this huge knowledge base of all of the issues and tasks and things that we've completed for each client over, I don't know, whatever, 4 years. Yeah, it'll be 4 years next week for me. So we have this huge knowledge base where if somebody comes in and starts working on a client and it's new to them, that they can just go back and see all the history.
I think eMyth and Built to Sell are there's a very similar sort of set of themes going on there. And to me, when I read them, it was almost like one is thinking about getting the business scaling up, and then the other one, on the front end, right? The eMyth is thinking about, okay, so you're in this place, you're not fully thrilled with how your business is going. How do we start building it into the business we want? And then Built to Sell is thinking about it toward the end, right? Once you've built that business you want, now how do you start thinking about positioning it as something, as an asset that you could actually turn around and sell? And I definitely agree with those takeaways on the eMyth, especially the systems and documentation part of it. We were recently in a discussion on Twitter, which turned out to be quite a valuable thread, I think, about selling firms, and how do you figure out the selling price? What is that based on? And one of the things that came out of that thread for me is that even though we talk about selling an accounting firm or even a marketing agency or any of these kind of professional services businesses, is we tend to think of it in terms of selling the client roster because that's what we've spent so long trying to build up, and really that's not necessarily the primary asset. In fact, almost it can be a detriment to what your selling price is. What you're really trying to sell is the actual infrastructure of the business that you've built, the systems, the documentation, the applications that you've built into it. And so if that's what you're focusing on as you're building your business, then that's probably the best way to drive the value of your business once you turn to sell it.
Absolutely. And I'll tell you what, that dovetails right into my second one, which is The Business of Expertise by David C. Baker. And David C. Baker was actually part of that discussion that we had on Twitter. It's a fantastic book. I highly recommend it for anybody who runs a professional services firm. David C. Baker has been very involved in marketing creative agencies, which is our niche. I know it's part of your niche as well. So a fantastic resource there. And my three takeaways, number one is positioning. Before I read the book, I don't recall when I read this, but before I read the book, I didn't really know what positioning was per se. It's a fancy word, and that's great. But what exactly is positioning? And to me, my takeaway was deciding what it is that you focus on and then telling people about it. So that's number one. Number two is having a deep focus, which means that you can solve problems for specific people and get paid really well to do it. And then number three is the 5 tests to determine if your positioning is good. And this was the real key to me. So number one, how many competitors and prospects are there? And then this gets to the viability piece. So you should have between 10 and 200 competitors. You should have between 2,000 and 10,000 prospects. And again, this is David's words, not mine, but I definitely took it as a takeaway and something you kind of stick your finger up in the air and see which way the wind is blowing when you're looking at these things. So that's the first test. The second test is, can you rattle off 20 insights off the top of your head relative to the domain? So that's a really great test to figure out if you have expertise in that particular area. You can just do it real quick. Number three is, can you buy a list? And it's not that you have to, but it just shows that one exists and there's commonalities, but amongst your potential customers. So in other words, and this is probably the best example that I thought that there was, people who go to conferences. Could you theoretically go buy a list of people that go to a specific industry conference that are your potential customers? Interesting concept. Number four is, there is a large enough employee universe. And this speaks right to the tax business right now. Is there an employee universe for that? I don't know. We can talk about that on a different show, but just go search Indeed and try to figure out, are there enough people who could actually serve, or go on LinkedIn too? Are enough people that I could potentially theoretically hire in order to serve this niche or this vertical or whatever you want to call it? And then lastly, will somebody pay you enough to travel, or will they pay you enough to go to them, or will they pay enough to come see you? Which gets into exactly how valuable is it, the thing that you're delivering.
Yeah, I like that. Before I get into that, I'm going to dovetail off that a little bit. David C. Baker is somebody that just for maybe like the last few months that I've really been following. Before the way I found out about David C. Baker was actually through his podcast co-host and online partner in crime is Blair Enns. And I found out about Blair Enns through reading, and this is not one of my five, but reading his Win Without Pitching manifesto in our Realize group. And that pretty solid book. As far as positioning goes, again, this is not one of my five, but I've just started a little while ago and haven't finished it yet. So it definitely wasn't a contender for my five, but obviously Awesome by April Dunford. And that's probably the first one where I've started thinking about positioning and what positioning actually means. And I think we're, in the accounting industry, we're starting to hear more of this, but positioning and differentiation is something that we're not really taking seriously enough as a field, right? And it's definitely something that we've got to get into more. But on that note, this is my second book, and this is probably the first one that I read where I started taking the ideas of branding and marketing and social media and content seriously, and that's They Ask You Answer by Marcus Sheridan. So Marcus Sheridan, a little bit of background. The premise of his book is he came in as an investor into a pool installation company in North Carolina in the mid 2000s. So mid 2000s, everything related to real estate and ancillary to real estate, such as installing pools, is booming, right? Everybody's buying houses. They're buying bigger houses. They're buying nicer houses. And what's one thing you can do to really make a nice house even nicer is put a pool in the backyard, right? And so business is booming. And then a couple years after that, the financial crisis hits. And so you get around into 08, 09, and nobody is buying houses. Nobody can afford the houses they've got. And absolutely no one is trying to install pools into their houses. So business plummets. And he essentially, it goes into survival mode. He's got a wife and kids at the time, and his entire livelihood is based on being a partner in this pool installation company. So he's got to figure out a way to make this thing work, and he just starts spending all of his free time, nights, weekends, writing up content. And so for this tiny little local pool company in North Carolina, he starts publishing blog posts daily. And the premise of the blog post is not trying to sell pools, although I'm sure that's what his instinct was telling him, but instead it was to answer questions that people were asking about pools. What kind of pool is best? Should I do above ground or below ground? What kind of material should the pool be made out of? There's 4 or 5 different, standard options, all these kinds of things. And so it's this field where, your general public is going to say, oh yeah, pool, that seems nice. But they have no idea what they're really talking about, right? Kind of like business, right? Yeah, having good bookkeeping for my business or having all my tax returns filed, that all sounds good, but I don't know how to do any of that, right? And so there's tons of questions that people would kind of stumble upon and maybe start Googling for, but really not even know how to begin to answer. So what he tried to do was build an online resource that would bring all of this information into one place and start pulling people into it. If that turned into customers, great. If it didn't, fine, right? It was going to attract a lot of attention. And from that, he not only grew that small North Carolina pool installation business through the recession, the Great Recession. Not only did it grow, but he started picking up national attention. Some of the work that he was doing actually got published in the New York Times at one point. So this kind of took off. And from this, he bases this premise around your marketing should not be telling people how great you are. The marketing should not be about you. The marketing should be about your prospective customers, right? What kinds of questions are they asking? What are they Googling? What are they searching for? And it's might not even be questions that you're interested in dealing with or asking or answering, but it's the questions that they're asking and they're looking for answers. So in the age of TikTok, right, your clients or your prospective clients, where are they going to go for answers to these questions? They're probably going to wind up on TikTok, hopefully right? They're probably going to, yeah, right? Hopefully they're probably going to wind up on TikTok. They're probably going to wind up on YouTube Shorts, right? And they're going to find these answers from people out there who have no clue what they're talking about. Or, right, you're going to put plenty of content out there to the point to where people are going to stumble on your website. They're going to actually read the answers from an expert, and they might even choose to try to do business with you so that you can handle those things for them. And that's the perspective I started taking. And that's sort of been the guiding principle of all the content that I've put out there for the last couple of years, is trying to not think about any of my social media interactions or anything I'm putting on my website from my own perspective, trying to think about it from the customer's perspective or the client's perspective.
So would you kind of call that inbound content marketing 101 a little bit?
Yeah, that's absolutely what he calls it. In fact, he now, I think he's moved on from that pool installation company, and he now runs a essentially a marketing consulting agency that helps business owners plan out and think about their content strategy.
Probably because the pool company was built to sell. Ooh, lame dad joke. There we go. Um, so yeah, that's really super interesting for sure. One of the things that we've started using in our firm is a tool called Ahrefs, Ahrefs, and it's basically a keyword research tool. That's been really interesting to just go look and see what our potential customers are Googling literally, and then you can build content around that. So that's cool. All right, cool. So that's number 2. What's your number 3?
Yeah, so my third book, taking a little bit of a shift here and starting to think more internally. You mentioned staffing, right? And obviously, if we're not going to be the bottlenecks in our own businesses, then at some point we got to have other people that can be doing work for us and potentially making decisions within our business. And so, how do you start thinking about managing that staff? Let's go ahead and assume that you've hired some people and you've got some people working for you. Now you have moved from what Michael Gerber and the E-Myth would call the technician into the role of the manager. So now you've actually got to manage these people. You got to make sure they're doing their jobs. You got to make sure they're happy in their work or they're going to leave, right? And we know employee retention is an issue, especially in the accounting field. And you've got to train these people and coach them in such a way that they're not just robots. They're not doing the same function every single day, that they're actually growing in their business, that they're expanding their capabilities, that they can take on more and more responsibility, and maybe even get to the point to where you promote them into a managerial position and you start hiring people under them, or they start hiring people to work under them. So again, with the end in mind, I'm trying to build this business that can eventually become fully staffed out. And so I needed to start thinking about how was I going to promote myself from technician, person doing all the work, into the role of manager. I have been listening to a podcast for years now, way before I even thought about being a business owner, but it's a podcast called Manager Tools. And one of the co-hosts of that podcast, his name is Mark Horstman, and he wrote a book called The Effective Manager. And it's essentially a distillation of everything that they have talked about on the podcast, everything that they've coached through their management consulting business. And it's essentially a set of steps to take raw but talented people that you're hiring at low level position, relatively low level positions in your business, and bring them up in such a way that you can promote them and expand their capacity, expand their capability, and actually build your staff. And at the same time, not lose your mind trying to herd cattle, right? Or trying to manage this staff, and at the same time be having all this technical work still dumped on you, or constantly be correcting their work, or getting frustrated with their lack of productivity. It's essentially a guidebook on how to be an effective manager. A couple of things that are of note in that book. One is their entire model is the first step of their entire model is one-on-ones. And so you should be having weekly one-on-ones with your staff, and the staff really should be driving those one-on-ones. A lot of managers that they work with, they come at one-on-ones from this perspective of this is a time for you to give announcements to the staff person, or this is a time for you to correct the mistakes that they made the week before. And that's actually the opposite. You're not building trust. You're not giving them a voice. You're not giving them the opportunity to grow. So rather, those one-on-ones should be coming to you with their ideas, their opinions, their issues, their concerns, their potential opportunities for growth, their interests, right? The things that they want to be doing more of in your business. And so, yes, you reserve some time to go through some of the issues that you have, but really the primary issue there is them. I actually started using this with some of my offshore accountants that I've got working in my business, and I think it's a combination of this is not common in the industry, and at the same time, a bit of a culture difference because they're offshore. But one thing that consistently came up in the reviews that they did with their HR people, and that came up in the quarterly reviews I was doing with my account managers through that offshoring service, was that they loved it. Right, it was the only opportunity that they'd really had
Mm-hmm.
to connect one on one with their manager or their boss. And so I think that's a really helpful aspect if you're not doing that already. And there's a million different ways you can do this, but really I think just starting with that weekly conversation, 30 minutes shouldn't take long, right? If you've only got a couple staff. If you have more staff than that and you're thinking there's no way I'd have enough time for that, then really you need to take a step back and look at your overall organizational structure, right? Why do you have so many direct reports to you? Do you need a second tier between you and them? And so it's not just about the direct one-on-one relationship. It starts getting you thinking about the overall structure of your business and your business model.
I love that. I love the way that you distilled that. What do you think as far as the number of people that should report to any given person? The number that I kind of roll around in my head is 5 to 6 max.
Yeah, so I think there's a couple things there. One is, right, if you're going to devote 30 minutes a week to each person, right, is that feasible and still getting your own work done? And just like we talk about with meetings with clients, even though the client put 30 minutes on your schedule, that meeting is going to take up a lot more than 30 minutes of your week, because you need to prepare for that meeting. You need to plan for it. And then after the meeting, you need to follow up and you need to actually do what you came up with during that meeting, right? So the same thing's going to happen here. You should probably, I remember back in academia, right? We always told students, for every hour that you're sitting in the classroom, plan 3 hours for all the studying and reading and preparing for class that you need to do, right? And I think it's a similar kind of thing in business, right? For every hour that you're planning on meeting with someone, or half hour, probably 3 or 4 times that amount of time is what you really need to be devoting to that. So if you start thinking about it that way, more than a handful of direct reports, and you're not going to have any time for anything else but just dealing with those direct reports. So I think you got to keep it limited there. The second thing is you've got to think about the network effects of having all of those relationships, right? Because the number of relationships goes up linearly, but the number of network connections within that group of relationships goes up exponentially. So if you've got 5 directs working with you, that's 6 people. That's 120 different ways of connecting and combining that group of 5 or 6 people. So if you start thinking about forming client teams within that group or focus groups within that, we're going to try to figure out this one research issue that's affecting a bunch of different clients. You got to think about all the exponential number of ways of combining those groups of people and relationships to manage. Plus, you're just going to have normal office politics. You're going to start having gossiping and, conflicts brewing within this group of people. As part of your job as a manager is to stay on top of all that people. It's part of what keeps a lot of people from wanting to go into management. So you got to think about all those network effects, and the work of managing a number of people increases exponentially, not linearly.
I love that. I love all of that. And I think you distilled that really, really well. Okay, so number 3 for me, and this is probably my favorite, and this is the most technical book on my list for sure, is Value Maps by Warren Miller. And I read this back in April of 2021. And I've got a little bit of a valuation background, and this is kind of sort of a valuation book, which is how I came upon it. But I think I was only on page 1, and I very quickly realized that there is an applicability here to CAAS for sure. And one of the things that we struggle with, especially around the pricing conversation, is how do we help our customers calculate an ROI on our services or justify our price or whatever that's going to be. And one of the tools that we've got in the tool set is around, the easiest one is tax planning, because there's an obvious ROI there. We saved you this much money, you paid us this. That's easy. But what about the rest of it? What about just the advisory? What about the being helpful part, where we're just being helpful on a daily basis, and some little nugget that we give a client saves them hundreds of thousands of dollars? If you do this enough, that will happen and the client will appreciate it. But it's really hard to translate that into, an ROI type of conversation and a pricing type of conversation. So that's one. The second one is you can ask a bunch of qualitative questions of your client and then just track that over time. And that's something that came from ed class that I learned at the most recent Scaling New Heights conference. And then the third one is how do you could track the value of your customer's business. And that's kind of the approach that this takes. So Warren Miller is a valuation guy, but he's built this process called a value map that helps your customers build value in their business. And honestly, this was a page turner for me. Like I could not put this book down for, it was about a week and a half. I was reading it at the donut shop until I got fat and we stopped going to the donut shop. That's neither here nor there. I literally just couldn't put this thing down. I had it on my phone. I was reading it literally every second that I had. Then I've got 2 pages of notes in Evernote from this book. It's really good. So trying to distill this down into 3 key takeaways was really difficult for me when I was doing this last night. So here's my best stab at it. But there are 3 variables to an entity's value. And these are basically the levers that we should try to pull in order to deliver advisory services. Number 1, expected free cash flow. Number 2 is expected growth in free cash flow. And then number 3 is risk. And risk has, I think, 3 or 4 components. And unsystematic risk is one component of those 3 or 4. And it's really the only component of risk that we don't have data for. You can go pull data, data from various valuation data providers, and that's cool and that's great. Unsystematic risk, not so much. So we need a framework for it, and that's the biggest opportunity, or the biggest advisory opportunity for us. And he lays out this framework, and he does it in graphical form. So I'm going to try to talk through this as best as I can, but definitely go pick up the book and definitely go look at this, because I'm definitely not going to do it justice, even though I'm going to try. So what we've got is a hexagon with 3 layers. The outside layer is the macro environment, and that's going to include innovation, economy, politics, disasters, demographics, lifestyles, and values. And then we've got the domain inside of that hexagon. So we've got a hexagon inside of a hexagon, and the domain is going to be your new entrants, customers, complements, competitors, suppliers, and substitutes. And that gets into the whole Michael Porter thing. If you've ever read Competitive Strategy or Competitive Advantage, this kind of relates to that. And that those books are referenced inside of value maps for sure. A lot of these things carry over the same ideas, just in new and different ways. But inside of that second hexagon, what we've got is the company. And we've got strategy, people, architecture, routines, and culture. And routines basically being how you do what it is that you do. So these are kind of all of the things that we can analyze for our customers. And these are the levers that we can pull in order to try to create value inside of the business. And if you kind of layer that on top of Ed Kless's idea of just having these qualitative type conversations with clients over time, one of the things that you could ask them is, do you feel like we have de-risked your business over the last year? And let's just say you ask them that on a 10-point scale. Last year there are 5, this year there are 7. You've just justified your value. But these things take time. Advisory is not one of these things, generally speaking, where I feel like we can justify our entire value inside of a subscription-based service in 2 minutes. It takes a minute, right? We have to get in there. We've got to learn about the business. We've got to deliver consistent value. You've got to be having conversations. It just takes a minute. So that is the first takeaway. Actually, those are the first 2 takeaways. And then the third takeaway is, on what basis do you compete? It's a question. And the way that we have applied that in our firm is we use that as a discovery call question. And the answer to that question will tell you everything you need to know about that business very, very quickly. If they say, I don't know, well, then you're dealing with one subset, right? If they tell you that they're competing on price, then you know really what they're focusing on, and cost control is going to be a big thing and stuff like that. If they tell you that they're competing on a specific vertical, you're going to have a whole host of other topics to talk about. If they tell you it's a horizontal type of competition, then that's a different conversation as well, meaning that they do something that nobody else really does. And then you can kind of drill into that. Like, well, we are the only people in this, or we're the only player in this space. And then you say, are you really? And then you do some research. It's like, well, yeah, have you thought about these people and these people and these people? Right. So you can really start to drill down. We've started using that as a discovery call question, and it's really kind of telling what the answers that you get. I definitely recommend the book because it is great for advisory. Really, really good. There's a ton of really good ideas. Honestly, I have 2 pages of notes on it. So Value Maps by Warren Miller, that is my third book. Jeremy, what's your next one?
Yeah. And you are a bit of a valuation guy. In fact, you've got a special credential in
Yep.
that. It's definitely something we need to bring up and talking about in future episodes.
Cool.
Yeah. Okay. So fourth book here, and these last two get more thinking about. They are business books, but they get more thinking about relationships and communication. So the first of these two, my fourth book that I'm going to go with is Quiet by Susan Cain. So I am an introvert, and I know this. Every personality test I've ever taken in my life proves that I am, in fact, an introvert. My wife is a strong introvert, and so is her father. Her mother, on the other hand, is not. She is a strong extrovert. And so when the four of us get together, it's always interesting. But uh, Quiet was the first time that I really read something that, first of all, resonated with me on like a deeply personal level. That's more in the nonfiction space. But then, second, that really started to help me make sense of why I get along with some people better than others in the workplace or even in relationships and friendships and things like that. So Susan Cain was an attorney, high priced attorney, New York City, that kind of thing, and she became interested in this question of why do some people tend to get along with others better or worse in the workplace, and she started studying the difference between introverts and extroverts. So very sort of top level, and I'm not a psychologist, I'm not a personality specialist, any of these kind of things, but I know myself and I know what I've read about myself. And so being an introvert essentially it does not mean, first of all, that you're shy, or that you're socially awkward, or that you avoid social interaction. In fact, quite the opposite. There are very outgoing, very personable, very relatable introverts, lots of them. You probably know lots of them. But what the difference between introverts and extroverts are is essentially what that social interaction does to you, does to your mental state, and really for a lot of people, even their physical state. So for an introvert, a lot of social interaction wears you out. For a lot of extroverts, a lot of social interaction amps them up even more. Right. So the people that you might go out with socially or that you hang out with professionally, the ones that don't want the party to stop, the ones that want to keep going, the ones that want to know, when the next time we're going to get together, or they don't want to stop being together, those are the extroverts. Those are the people that are craving more and more. The people that after a little bit of interaction say, okay, I got to go now, right? I got to go home and recharge. Those are the introverts. So for me, I don't mind social interaction. I love public speaking. I was a university instructor for years, right? I don't mind I don't mind the spotlight being on me, but for a limited brief time. And then after class, right? I never scheduled my office hours after my class meetings, right? A lot of college instructors, they will sort of pile that up to where they'll go teach a class, and then right after that they'll come back to their office and have office hours. I could not do that because I didn't want students following me back to my office after I just got done giving a 50-minute lecture, right? I needed separation. I needed time off. I needed a chance to go back and recharge my batteries. And when you think about these sort of effects and interactions in the workplace, the people that seem agitated after a long day of work and they don't seem very personable and they don't want to go out with their colleagues after work for drinks, or they don't really look forward to the office Christmas party or birthday party or whatever kind of event after a long day of work, it's probably not because they're irritable people and they don't like people and they don't get along with people and you need to fire them. It's probably just because they're worn out on a social and personal and psychological level. And so this sort of goes along with the discussion that we've had over the last decade or so as far as the modern office, right? And how should we be structuring the modern office, right? We think about this like with Google, right? Should we have the big open office plan with foosball tables and no cubicles and everybody's just kind of wandering around the office together and everybody's chit chatting with everybody? For some people like me, introverts, that seems like a nightmare, right? I would quit that job after a day.
Well, if you don't have a slide in your office, are you really running a true office?
Right.
Right?
Absolutely.
Fair question.
And so, I think regardless of which end of that spectrum you're on between introversion and extroversion, I think this is a really helpful book for just thinking about why people uh, behave and interact in the office or even in relationships the way they do. So my wife and I, like I said, we're both introverts. We both know that personal time is deeply important to us. So if we get to the end of a long day and my wife wants to have an hour to herself to just zone out to some YouTube videos, I'm not going to take that personally. If I need to come back into my office and play a video game on my computer for an hour, she's not going to take that personally, right? That's not a problem with our relationship. That's just us as individuals having to do what's healthy for us as individuals. So there's a lot of applications, like we talked about earlier in the show, between both business and personal.
Yep, I love that. And I'm an introvert as well, so I totally relate to that. And this show is just proof that two introverts can get together and have a podcast, right?
Absolutely. There you go. We went to a conference together,
Sure
sat
did.
with a lot of people, talked with a lot of people, had a lot of fun. But
Absolutely.
boy, I was ready to get back home and relax for a little bit.
I totally get that. All right. Next one for me is Getting Naked, a business fable about shedding 3 fears that sabotage client loyalty. So that is by Patrick Lencioni.
Getting naked. What
Getting
is
naked.
This?
Yeah, I know. Well, I'm gonna
spicy stuff for CPAs here.
I know. I'm gonna blow your mind here in a second. That's by Patrick Lencioni, and he also wrote Death by Meeting, which is a good read too. But if you go back to episode 1, the whole just be helpful thing, which we have repeated for, I don't know, what's this, episode 7? 7 episodes now.
6 or 7 episodes.
Yeah. Just be helpful literally came from this book for me. That's it. So the first takeaway was just be helpful. The second takeaway is make it about the client. And then the third takeaway is don't be afraid of being dumb. So ask the question. If you really want to ask a question, just ask the question. Or if you want to propose an idea, propose an idea. Don't worry about looking dumb or looking not smart or whatever. There's ways to phrase those things in a non-threatening, non-dumb way. And then you can unpack those things with the client. And the client will probably appreciate it, that you went out on that ledge and that you made yourself vulnerable and that you're just trying to help them run their business, or you're just trying to get deeper into an issue to figure out what's really going on. So, but it's a really good book. It's a business fable. So it comes at it from it's not like a how to or whatever. It's just a fictional story about 2 consulting firms basically. And it's super digestible, quick read, just a ton of great takeaways there though, especially I think for firm owners who, it's usually really easy for us to just sit there and, bill by the hour and try to make sure that things are in scope. And, we get worried about all of those things when we're delivering our services. And really the whole motto of this book is just be helpful, start helping, and then the rest of it will take care of itself. So that's where that comes from though. If you're interested in unpacking the whole just be helpful thing, it comes from that book, Getting Naked.
That last takeaway there about don't be afraid to ask questions, that's probably the most common thing I see, especially with newer firm owners and solo firm owners in the groups that I interact with a lot of the questions they're bringing to these Facebook groups for accountants, this kind of thing, is questions where they're trying to get other accountants to answer a question that person just needs to go ask the client, right? They could have saved themselves days of delay and by just going back to the client and saying, hey, I just need to clarify this one thing. Instead, they try to bring it to another accountant or a group of accountants and almost as if we would know what's up with the client better than they would. And it's your client. You have to go talk to your own clients. There's this fear, right, that you're going to upset the client or annoy the client or something like that by asking them more questions. But the only way you're going to be able to do the work for them is to just go talk to them.
Yeah. I mean, I think just as CPAs, especially when you're brand new, it's super easy to you're starting with imposter syndrome to some extent, probably, unless you're the most confident person ever. But you're starting with this imposter syndrome. Can I really do this? Can I bring revenue into my firm? Can I feed my family? That sort of thing. So you're starting with imposter syndrome. And when you have that, you don't want to look dumb. And it's hard. You got to get past that. You got to just go ask the client the question. I mean, that's everything that we do, especially in the advisory space, it all goes back to client questions. There's a two-way information sharing that needs to happen there. All right. So what do you got next?
So I think we've got this one in common on our list. So I saved this one for last, and this probably, page for page has had the biggest effect on me, again, both in business and in personal life, out of all of these books. And that is Never Split the Difference by Chris Voss. Chris Voss is a former FBI negotiator. And when I say FBI negotiator, he is going into situations, and he talks about a lot of these stories in the book, where he is dealing with international terrorists in foreign countries that have American hostages. And he goes in there with one goal and one goal only, which is the safe return of that hostage. And so the stakes could not be higher. And he talks about the tools and the strategies that he used in those interactions and how they can apply to your business life, your work life, your personal life. And it's actually pretty basic stuff. Once you read through the book, you start thinking about it. The thing about negotiation is, and I recommend this book a lot to new accountants and firm owners, because it's the word negotiation for a lot of people carries a negative connotation. They think negotiation, and their minds automatically go to a place of conflict. And I think really the opposite is true, especially when we're talking about business, and especially when we're talking about relationships. Negotiation is not conflict. Negotiation is two people that have not yet gotten on the same page about what they're trying to get out of the situation that they're in. So if anything, we need to stop thinking about negotiation as conflict and start thinking about it as collaboration. Right. So, and that's one of the themes of the book. That's one of the takeaways. In fact, he says, don't think about the person you're negotiating with as your adversary. Think of them as your counterpart. Right. You're both trying to get to the same end point. You just both have different ways of thinking about getting there. And this is from someone who has negotiated with international terrorists, like holding hostages, right? So if he can sit there and think of that individual as a counterpart, as somebody that he's trying to collaborate with, then surely we can think of our clients, our spouses, our friends, our neighbors the exact same way. Right. If it's a neighbor that you're having, an issue with, you both just want to go about your daily lives. If it's a spouse, you both just want to have a happy, healthy marriage. Right. There's no reason for us to go into these situations thinking of them in terms of conflict. And it all boils down to communication. Right. Communication in a way that shows the other person that, one, you're aware of the fact that there is a situation that's annoying them as much as it is you. And the problem is the situation. The problem is not the other person. So you have to put the focus on the situation and not on the other person. So you can't get defensive. You also can't get accusatory, right? So how do you find the right balance, right? And that narrow space between defending yourself and putting the other person into a defensive situation, right? How do you make it to where that person wants to keep talking to you, right? Chris Voss goes back to hostage negotiation. The goal of a hostage negotiator is to keep the person on the phone, right? As long as that person is talking, they haven't killed the hostage yet, right? So if you can keep them talking, you're going okay. And again, it's back to this issue of feel free to ask the client questions. Don't be afraid of that. If the client is talking to you, they haven't fired you yet, right? So if the client is responding to you, if they're talking to you, it's when they don't respond to you. It's when you haven't heard from the client for 6 months. That's when you need to get nervous. But if they're responding to you, if they're talking to you, if they're engaging you, even if they're angry because you haven't gotten on the same page yet, but they're putting effort into the relationship still. Right. And that's what you got to focus on. You got to focus on the relationship, not the situation. Right. And so I think that there's a lot of good lessons out of that book for both business and personal life.
I think you've distilled that beautifully. This book was on the original list that I sent you as well. So we had some overlap here. It's a tremendous book. I can't recommend it enough. The couple of the takeaways that I got from there, I would classify these as fairly tactical. But one, all negotiation is an information gathering process. Exactly what you said, asking questions, an information gathering process. And what I would offer to our listeners is think about that in the context of your discovery calls and or in the context of value pricing. all negotiation is an information gathering process. Interesting idea. So that's one. Number two, calibrated questions. And those avoid can, is, are, do, and does, because those lead to closed-ended answers. And instead ask what, how, and sometimes, not often, sometimes, why. And because why is kind of accusatory, right? We don't want to be accusatory. We want to be asking open-ended questions. So one of the things that we talk about in our firm all the time is asking what and how questions. I'm fairly certain that all of my team members are tired of me bringing this up. Pretty sure. You could ask them. I don't know. And it's really interesting because I was going back through my notes on this book. Then I read this, it was well over a year ago, and I took Leadership Academy 2.0 at Engage. We do that every year. We have this kind of reunion type learning session where we do, leadership stuff for a day. And one of the key takeaways from that was asking what and how questions. So this is a really good example of how you can kind of, pick up ideas from a variety of different places and in a variety of different contexts, and you kind of smash them together and you get this insight, right? Really kind of cool. And then the last one was a really powerful question to ask is, how am I supposed to do that? I don't know if you remember that from the book, but how am I supposed to do that? And then just basically putting it back on the other person to help you figure out exactly how do you accomplish what it is that they're asking you to do. So really great book for sure. The last one that I've got on my list is Daring Greatly by Brene Brown. And this one, if I'm not mistaken, was pre-reading again for a Leadership Academy session that we did several years ago at Engage for Lab 2.0. And three quick takeaways from that one. I definitely recommend anything by Brene Brown, but it's great. And Leadership Academy basically taught us that leadership is really about fixing yourself first, which was a totally radical idea for me when I went into it. So her content is really great for that. But number one, empathy is a simple acknowledgement, and there's no right or wrong way to do it. Empathy is kind of one of the cornerstones to our culture strategy. Our culture strategy is compassion, which is empathy plus action. If we're not taking any sort of action, then really the empathy for what we do is kind of worthless. So it's compassion, learning, innovation. And this book really gets into both of those. So number one, empathy, that gets to that first pillar. Number two is shame is the silent killer of innovation. And we need to have internal strategies to deal with that, to make sure that it doesn't really exist, because then that kills our third pillar. And then number three, trust is built little by little over time. We don't get it immediately when we're working with a customer when we're working with a team member. It takes a while to do that. So just give yourself some patience, but realize that it's got to be a consistent effort and it's got to be done over time. That's my whole list, Jeremy.
Brene Brown is one of those that I've heard a ton about, and I've yet to read anything by her. So this might be the impetus to finally go get one of her books and start reading that. So that is a fantastic list. None of the 5 that you mentioned, except for the E-Myth. I read the E-Myth, but the other 4 I have not read yet. So I have 4 new books to add to my Kindle library that is already overflowing with unread and half-read books, but definitely got some ideas. And boy, I think every single one of these is at least an episode in itself down the road at some point, especially some of these that we have in common on our list, like Never Split the Difference. I think, like you said, the applications of that book to discovery calls, pricing, client management, even how you're working with your staff, right? I know when I get in one-on-ones with my staff, the difference between a what question and a why question is huge, right? So the applications are pretty far reaching for that book. And I definitely think all these books probably deserve a little bit deeper dive here on the show. But yeah.
You said it exactly right, though. The negotiation thing is not about confrontation necessarily. It's about collaboration.
Absolutely. When
you totally nailed it.
When you get your mindset out of thinking that everything is a conflict and everybody's going to be mad at you and everybody is coming after you and you're going to piss everybody off by raising your hand or asking a question. I taught for years, and I spend a lot of time trying to encourage my students to stop being afraid and start raising their hand and start saying stuff, right? And yeah, there are always those 2 or 3 students that you wish wouldn't raise their hand so often, right? But for the other 99% of the people in the room, right, speak up. And I think that's one of the common themes among all these books, right, is communication is key, right? And I mean, that's a bit cliche to say, but you can package that and interpret that in so many different ways that you have to communicate. If we are going to be advisors and we are going to work with clients, the number one thing we can do to help ourselves and to help them to be helpful to everyone involved is communicate more.
For sure. I love that. So, Jeremy, you want to wrap it up? Tell our listeners where they can find us and what they need to do?
Absolutely. So be sure to like and subscribe if you're watching this on YouTube. If you're listening to this in your podcast app and you haven't subscribed yet, be sure to do that as well. Please feel free to leave us a review. I think the last episode, Chris read a wonderful review that we got, and we really look forward to reading more of those on the air. So be sure to leave your review if you found this at all helpful. And if not, let us know that too. Let us know how we could be more helpful to you. You can visit the show online at cpaadvisoryshow.com, and you can follow us on Twitter at CPA Advisory Show. Chris, where can people reach out to you specifically on the internet?
Sure. You can find us at betterwaycpa.com, or you can find me on Twitter at Chris Hervishon. How about yourself?
And I am at JWellCFO on Twitter, and that's also the website, jwellcfo.com. Chris, thanks again. As always, this has been another fun episode, and looking forward to more of this kind of discussion. I think our next episode, we've got another guest lined up, but it's always fun to have these one-on-ones with you.
Yep, likewise. I enjoyed it.
Good deal.
Thanks, Jeremy.
Thank you for listening, and have a good one.